All right, chapter 11, section 1, circumference and arc length. First, circumference of a circle. We should know the formula. We should know the rule for circumference of a circle because this is something that you guys have been covering since middle school. So, looking at it, the circumference of my circle is written in two ways. Well, circumference equals, that's one way. You could either have pi times diameter or 2 pi r. I feel like this is where some students get confused. You need to understand that all three of these are the exact same thing. My circumference equals my pi times my diameter, which also equals 2 pi r. Diameter, the D is for diameter, the R is for radius. Okay, so we should know the difference between all of these. Here's my diameter in blue, here's my radius in red. All right, arc length. Please understand there's a difference between the words length and measure. Okay, an arc length is a portion of the circumference of a circle. You can use the measure of the arc. So we covered measure of the arc in the last few lessons. You need to understand that the measure of the arc is in degrees. Okay, you could use the measure to find the length, which is in linear units. For example, inches, feet, centimeters. If I were to take this piece of my circle, okay, again, it's not going to be in degrees, and make it straight and measure it with a ruler. That's my length. Okay, the measure of this is in degrees. The length is in units. So understand the difference. I have degrees and I have units. So this is where most people get confused because they don't understand the difference between on the rules. Arc length. In order to solve for arc length in a circle, the ratio of the length of the given arc to the circumference is equal to the ratio of the measure of the arc to 360. So, key thing here, it says the length of the given arc to the circumference. How many ways can I write my circumference? I could write it as C, I could write it as 2 pi r, or I could write it as pi times diameter. And I'm going to write all three. Okay. Normally, when you're solving for arc length, or they're giving you the arc length, then you have to solve for something else. The formula we're going to use is this one. However, like I said, going back to the previous slide, we know that circumference equals pi times diameter, which also equals 2 pi r. So, a couple ways you can write this. Please pay attention to this. Please understand it. If you don't, stop me and I'll explain it. I have my arc length, okay, equals the measure of my arc. I'm just writing it generically because I don't know what it's going to be. The measure of the arc over 360 times, it could be 2 pi r. Okay, so that's one way. Another way I can use arc length, and this will make more sense as we move on and you see what they're asking, equals the measure of the arc over 360 times my circumference. And then again, I have arc length equals the measure of the arc over 360 times pi times diameter. So all of these are the exact same thing, except, again, it depends on what they're giving me. If they're giving me my radius and they want me to find the arc length, I'm going to use the one with radius. If they're giving me my circumference and I have to find my arc length, I'm going to use the one with circumference. And if they're giving me my diameter, I'm going to use the one with my diameter to find my arc length or vice versa. So this is where most students get confused. This doesn't make sense. What am I doing with it? In the examples, I'm going to write one of these. I'm either using, again, the one with the radius, the one with the circumference, or the one with the diameter to solve for what's given. So let's go ahead and look at the examples and see what we need. So these are going back to just solving for my circumference or radius and diameter. We're not using arc lengths yet, but we will eventually use that. So it says find the circumference. Again, write it as many times. Circumference equals pi times diameter, or 2 pi r. Okay, they want me to find my circumference of a circle with a diameter 5 inches. Leave your answer in terms of pi and use 3.14 for pi before you start solving. You need to understand what that means. So let me explain it. If they're asking leave in terms of pi, or leave, we'll say leave exact. If they say leave exact, or in terms of pi, I'm going to leave my answer as 5 pi. Okay, that's how I'm leaving it. So when I'm solving, I'm trying to get my answer, and then it says leave in terms of pi or leave is as exact. My answer is going to be 5 pi. I'm not going to evaluate it. I'm not going to change it. Now, you may see them say, okay, use pi and round. I'm now going to actually use the pi button on my calculator. So then I'm going to plug in 5 times pi on my calculator, which is about, we'll just say 15.71. Okay, I'm rounding to the nearest hundredth. Okay, that's another way they can ask you for your answer. Another way they can say is use 3.14 as pi and round. So pay attention to my answer. I'm now using 5 times 3.14, and my answer is going to be 15.70. There's a difference between use pi and use 3.14. Okay, do we all understand that? There's a difference between all 3 of these if I were to give you an answer. So understand that all 3 of these are going to be different. Let me not put it so close. Okay, so I have 1, I have 2, and I have 3 different ways that they can ask me for an answer. Any questions on that? I feel like that's also where people got confused, depending on how they're asking the question. So let's go back to A. Find the circumference of the circle with the diameter. So my circumference equals, I'm going to use pi times diameter because they're giving me my diameter, and all I have to do is take it and plug it in. They want me to answer it in 2 ways. In terms of pi, and use 3.14. So we kind of solved this already. Circumference is going to equal in terms of pi. 5 pi. I'm not going to change it any other way. Okay, so this is in terms of pi. Now they want me to solve it using 3.14. So again, circumference equals, I'm going to do 3.14 times my diameter. And yes, we kind of solved this already. If you plug it into the calculator, it's going to be 15.7. And again, this is my answer for using 3.14. So there's a difference between both my answers. Please make sure you read them carefully on your homework and on your quiz. All right, looking at the next one, it says find the radius of the circle with the circumference 17 pi feet. So they're giving me my circumference. I have to find my radius. Which one am I going to use? Pi times diameter or 2 pi r? 2 pi r because I have my radius in it. So again, I'm just going to write it. Circumference equals pi times diameter, which also equals 2 pi r. What are they giving me? They're asking for my radius. And they're giving me my circumference, so I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to have circumference, which is 17 pi, equals 2 pi r. And I'm going to solve for my radius. How would I solve for my radius? Keep in mind this is all multiplication. I have to do inverse operations. What am I going to do first? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to divide. Okay, if you want to do it in steps, just to double check, you can divide it in steps. Okay, so let's just divide pi first. Let's do it in steps. I'm going to divide my pi. They're both eventually going to cancel out. I'm then going to have 17 equals 2r. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. If you divide it correctly, your answer is going to be radius equals 17 over 2. Or you can change it to your decimal, which is 8.5 feet. So either one of these are correct. If it asks you to round, obviously it's going to be your decimal, but this is fine. All right, looking at the next examples, we're still doing the same thing. It says find the diameter of the circle with the circumference 16 feet. Okay, use your calculator and round to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to be using the pi button, not 3.14, not leaving it exact. I'm going to actually use the pi on my calculator. So find the diameter. I need to know my rules. Circumference equals pi times diameter, which also equals 2 pi r. I'm going to use the one with diameter because they're asking me to find the diameter. So plugging in what I have, I'm going to have 16, which is my circumference, equals pi times diameter. And how am I solving for my diameter? What do I have to do? Anybody? What do I have to do first? Okay, pi times diameter. How do I get my diameter by itself? Divide by pi on both sides of my equal sign. They're going to cancel out. And my answer for my diameter is going to be 16 over pi. But they asked me to use my calculator. So plug that into your calculator. 16 divided by pi and round to the nearest hundredth. That's 2 places after the decimal. What would my answer be? 5.09 would be my answer. All right, looking at B, it says a car tire has a diameter of 28 inches. How many revolutions does the tire make while traveling 500 feet? Keep in mind of your units, I have inches and feet. So, revolutions, we need to know what that means. Revolution, 1 revolution is the circumference. So just writing it on there so we know. So what am I going to do first? I need to figure out the circumference of my tire. How would I do that? I'm given the diameter, so I need to plug it in. I'm going to have circumference equals pi times my diameter, which is 28. Are they telling me to use 3.14 or just put in the calculator? Just plug it into the calculator. 28 pi is going to be, keep in mind I'm not rounding till the end. My circumference equals 87.964 964. We'll just leave it at 5. Keep in mind this is inches. How do I change this to feet? Okay, convert to feet. Divide by 12. Yeah, but I'm rounding my answer at the very end to the nearest tenth. So now I'm going to convert it to feet. I'm going to take that 87.9645 divided by 12. I'm going to get 7.3304. And then my last step is to what? Okay, they want to know how many revolutions does a tire make while traveling 500 feet? I'm then going to go ahead and lastly I have to just divide. So 500 divided by, what did I have before? 7.3304. Divide it on your calculator. If you divided correctly, what's my answer? How many revolutions? Good, 68.2. 68.2 revolutions. Okay, any questions on these two? All right, for these, it says find the indicated measure, keep answers in terms of x. So I have to leave x there. They want me to find the length of PQ. The length of arc PQ. So now I'm finding my length. Again, just writing them. We had those 3 rules. We can use them either way. I'm just going to write it as one big one. I can have arc length. Keep in mind the length is different than the measure. Equals the measure of the arc over 360. And I could have one of 3 things when I'm solving. I could either multiply by c, I could multiply by 2 pi r, or I could multiply by pi times diameter. All of these are the same thing. But again, I'm only using the one I need for what's given. So if I'm looking at this diagram right here, which one do you think I'm going to use to solve for my length? The circumference, 2 pi r, or pi times diameter? Which one? Look at what's given for A. Which one am I going to use? Pi times diameter. So for A, I'm going to write it. I am using arc length equals the measure of the arc divided by 360 times pi times diameter. Plugging in what I have, I'm going to highlight it just so we know. My measure of the arc is 75. My diameter is 9, and I'm solving for the arc length. So solving for the arc length, I'm going to just put x equals, the measure is 75 because they're giving me my central angle, 360 times pi times 9. There's, again, multiple ways you can solve this. Try and solve it on your own, and then I'm going to solve it. All right, keep in mind the directions say keep in terms of pi. So you should not be evaluating pi. So what am I going to do first? Looking at this, you could change this to a fraction, put it over 1. So I'm just going to multiply across first. 75 times 9. Okay, 75 times 9. I'm going to get, I know it's a large number, 675 pi over 360. I know I could simplify 675 over 360. And again, you guys should know how to do that on your calculators. If you divided correctly, or you simplified, let me say more simplified correctly, you should have had 15 over 8. So I'm going to go ahead and get my answer. My circumference equals, you could write it one of 2 ways. 15 pi over 8 or 15 over 8 pi. They're both the exact same thing. Okay, again, there are other ways to solve this. As long as we got to the same answer, that's fine. Yes?
How did you get 675?
Okay, so how did I get there? I'm just going to highlight it so you know. Multiplied 75 times 9. If I were to write this out, I could write it out as 75, because it's all multiplication, times 9 pi. I'll write it out. Over 360. So then what did I do? I multiplied these two to give me that 675. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, there's other ways you can do this. You could have simplified this one first and then eventually multiplied your 9. But with multiplication, it doesn't matter the order on how you're multiplying. So also don't forget that. All right, looking at the next one. They want me to solve for my circumference. So again, looking back at what we wrote, which one do you think we're going to use? I'm solving for what? Circumference. So which one are we going to use? The one with circumference, the one with 2 pi r, or the one with pi times diameter? The one with circumference. Okay. So yes, I'm going to use arc length. Guys, again, the more times you write it, the more you're going to remember it. Equals the measure of the arc over 360 equal or times my circumference. So let's go ahead and solve. Do I know my arc length? Yes, I do. My arc length is 60. I'll do it that way. And then my measure of my arc is 270. So plugging in what I have, I'm going to have arc length is 60 pi equals 270 over 360 times my circumference. And again, I'm solving for circumference. When they end in 0, I personally just like to cross it out. And now I have 27 over 36, which can be simplified. That's going to be simplified to... get a different color. Simplifying it to 3 over 4. Okay, so I'm just going to rewrite it so it looks a little neater. I'm going to have 60 pi equals 3 over 4 times c. Trying to get c by itself. How do I get rid of that 3 over 4? Jonah?
Multiply 60 by 4.
Okay. Just a little more than that, yeah.
Multiply 4 on both sides.
Okay, you could kind of do it in one step, but yes, you can do it in one step. What do I have a fraction? I'm going to divide by a fraction. What's the rule for dividing by fractions? Good. Keep, change, flip. Okay. Again, you can solve this any way you want. So if you want to solve it that way by multiplying by 4 on both sides, that's fine. So I would do multiply by its reciprocal on both sides. Again, this goes back to algebra, guys. You have to know how to solve. I'm going to have 4 over 3 times 60 pi equals my circumference. And yeah, you could put it over 1 and then multiply. So I'm going to have 4 times 60 pi over 3. And solving it, 4 times 60, I'm going to get 240 pi over 3. And then divide. 240 divided by 3, I'm going to get 80 pi equals c. Again, if you solved it a different way, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. All right, looking at this one, same thing. Find the indicated measure. Use a calculator, round your answer to the nearest tenths. So looking at what they're giving me, what am I going to use to solve for this? Hopefully we kind of know what we're doing. I'm going to use my arc length equals the measure of the arc over 360 times what? What am I going to use for this? my circumference, because again, like the last one, we're solving for my circumference. So going ahead and plugging in, my arc length is 61.26 equals the measure of my arc is 270 over 360 times my circumference, and that's what I'm trying to solve. Go ahead and solve this one on your own since it's similar to the last one. I'm going to give you guys some time and then we're going to check it. All right, let's go ahead and see if we got the same answer. Again, we could solve it multiple different ways as long as we're getting to the same thing. Again, I'm going to cross out my zeros. I'm going to simplify this to 3 over 4, similar to what we did last time. So I'm going to have 61.26 equals 3 over 4 times C. I like to multiply by the reciprocal, 4 over 3, for these to cancel out. I'm now going to have 4 times 61.26 over 3 equals my circumference. Going ahead and multiplying these two, I'm going to get 245.04 over 3, and then dividing, which is going to give me my answer. Circumference equals approximately, it said round to the nearest tenth, 81.7. Okay, so make sure you got there. Questions, comments, concerns on this one? All right, let's go ahead and look at the next one. They want me to solve for my radius. So I'm going to use, they're giving me my arc length equals the measure of my arc divided by 360 equals what? What am I going to use for this one? Good, the one with the radius, 2 pi r. So plugging in what I have, again, I'm solving for my radius. I have 10.5 equals 150 over 360 times 2 pi r. Go ahead and solve for radius. I'm going to give you guys some time and then we're going to check it. All right, checking your work. Again, I just like to cancel out my zeros. I'm going to go ahead and change this to a fraction. So now I'm going to multiply. I'm going to multiply 15 and 2. So I'm going to have, again, we could solve it many different ways. I'm going to have 30 pi r over 36. Simplifying these two to 5 over 6. Okay, then I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, 6 over 5 on both sides. So I'm going to have 63 over 5 equals pi times r. Because I'm dividing by pi, I'm going to change that 63 over 5 to a decimal. So I'm going to change it to 12.6 over pi equals r. And they want me to solve it and evaluate it. So my radius is going to equal 4.0 as my answer. Again, we could have solved this different ways as long as we're getting to the same answer. All right, this is converting degrees to radians, radians to degrees. Pay attention to the difference. My degrees, if you haven't noticed, have a degree sign. Okay, degrees have a degree sign. So if you're looking at this, these are my degrees. And my radians are right here. So, what do we need to know for this? Solving depends on what they're giving you. How we like to solve it is, when they're giving me degrees to radians, I'm going to use degrees times pi over 180. Okay, my degrees times pi over 180. And when they're giving me radians or asking for radians to degrees, I'm going to use radian times 180 over pi. Keep in mind this 180 is my degrees. Keep in mind, if you're wondering where am I getting this degrees in radians and why am I multiplying it, it literally says right here, multiply by degree measure by, this is the one I'm using, multiply radian measure by, this is what I'm using. All right, looking at these examples, they're asking me convert degrees to radians. So I'm going from degrees to radians. So looking at, I'm going to use my degrees times pi over 180. Plugging it in, they're giving me my degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and use it. 15 times pi over 180. Multiplying, you're going to get 15 pi times 180. This is going to simplify. We should know that. So simplifying it, I'm going to get 1 over 12. And my answer is just going to be pi over 12. And I'm done. Okay, looking at the next one, they're asking for radians to degrees. Radians to degrees. So now I'm going to do the opposite. I have radians times 180 over pi. Plugging it in, what's the radians they gave me? 4 pi over 3 times 180 over pi. I can cross simplify. Pay attention to what I'm cross simplifying. My pi's are going to simplify to 1. And then we can go ahead and simplify my 3 and 180. This is going to be 1. This is going to be 60. And all I have left is 4 times 60, or you could put in parentheses if that helps. And that's going to equal my answer as 240 degrees. Okay, this is pretty easy. You just have to remember the rules.